You're listening to the Shopify Solutions Podcast, a podcast for Shopify store owners that brings you concrete examples on how to build and grow your e-commerce business. My name is Scott Austin, and I have an e-commerce agency named Jade Puma. In this podcast, I'll share my e-commerce insights and best practices with you. Hey everyone, Scott Austin here, and this week we have a guest with us. Her name is Ellen Lewis, and she is the owner of the Shopify store, Crazy For You. Welcome, Ellen.
Thanks. Thanks so much for having me, Scott.
Can you tell us a little bit about Crazy For You? What is it that your business is?
Okay, so your listeners probably can't see that it's crazy for EWE, which is pronounced you, but it's a female sheep. So it's kind of an inside joke. And I sell yarn. I sell everything that you would need to make sweaters, garments, anything knitted or crocheted.
Nice. And how did you get into this business?
I started knitting when I was in college, and there was a little yarn store near where I went to school, and I used to go and hang out there. And I really, really liked it. It was just so much fun to be there and to meet the other ladies. And it was kind of like what they call a third place. It wasn't home, it wasn't school, and it just was a place that I felt comfortable. And they were very nice and welcoming, and they helped me learn. And I bought a bunch of stuff. And after college, I always thought, oh, it would be so nice to own a yarn store like that. But no, I had a degree and I went off and I did stuff. And then life happened and everything just sort of fell into place for me to kind of fill this dream that I'd wanted to do for a long time.
And how long has Crazy For You been around?
So I opened the brick and mortar store in 2004.
You're retail first, and then you got into online later.
Absolutely, brick and mortar first. I mean, I've had a Shopify store since 2012, and I had a website, without really a huge intention of doing e-commerce. To be honest, I kind of resisted e-commerce for a long time because you open a yarn store because it's about community. It's about interacting with the people and helping them get stuff. And my image of e-commerce was, warehouse packing stuff up, very anonymous, without that personal touch. And that really wasn't what I wanted in a business. I wanted the interaction with the people and, the very hands-on kind of helping and building community, getting to know folks.
So you've had the retail store for 18 years, a website for a little while, and then the past 10 years you've been in e-commerce. And that's a long time ago now. You've been in e-commerce for 10 years. How do you today balance between online and retail? Are they separate businesses in your mind? Do you focus on one or the other? How do you manage those two different channels?
I don't see them as separate businesses, honestly. I know that they probably are, and I should be measuring them in different ways. But the truth is that a lot of people come through the store, on vacation or, visiting or whatever, because, the little tiny town that I'm in has kind of become a tourist destination. And people come in and, they're like, oh, I love this store. I love this. Oh my gosh, do you send stuff out? Do you do phone orders and all of that? So that's sort of why I started e-commerce. But even now, people that are local will order online. There it's gotten to be obviously such a thing. And I mean, definitely post-pandemic when I was, when I really got serious with the online, it's the same business. A lot of the customers are the same. They may come into the shop or they may order online. And it doesn't really matter. I do have in-store pickup so people can see my newsletter, order the thing, and then come and pick it up the next day or whatever. I can mail it to them. It doesn't matter. So to me, it's the same business. It's just a different fulfillment methodology.
Excellent. And the topic I wanted to bring you on for the podcast today was about community. And it's interesting is as you're talking about your business, you've already brought up community a couple of times. So it sounds like it's really important for you go back to why you got into this space because you saw the local yarn store as that third space for you, which I think is community. So why don't you tell us a little bit about how you have a community around your business and what does the word community mean for Crazy For You?
Community is about people making connections. I guess the thing about knitting and it being that third place is that people come in a lot of times when they have no real knitting emergency. They don't necessarily need to buy anything. They just want a friendly space to be. And they know that whenever they come in there, whoever is in is going to be glad to see them and welcome them kind of with open arms. I have a poster that somebody made for me, and it has the lyrics from the Cheers theme
Mhm.
song. And it's funny because I do know people's names. I do remember their names. It's just a thing that is important to me, is remembering people's names. So they come in, I remember their name, I call them by name. And when they come into the shop, I have a big table in the middle. And if there's anybody else sitting there, I always introduce everybody around. So it's a very friendly, welcoming space. And that community, people know that it's available for them. You know, when they're my customers, they bring their projects, they come in, they get help, and sometimes they just hang out. And I really do try to foster that in the shop. We used to have Friday mornings, we would do coffee, called it Coffee for You. And we would put on a big pot of coffee, and sometimes people would bake something or whatever. But it was the thing. It was a time to be together because they knew that there was going to be that engagement, that there would be other people there to hang out with. And it's so interesting. Over the years, I've noticed and I've mentioned and I've shared with my whole community the fact that people come and they have nothing in common except the fact that they like to knit. I mean,
Mhm.
we have women from all walks of life, from all different backgrounds and ages and whatnot, but they all come because they love to knit and they're customers of the store and they meet each other, and it's phenomenal. They love it. The kinds of differences in ages, you know, you'll have young women who have small children, you have women who have grandchildren that age. And the kind of sharing there, I mean, I hate to say that it's a woman thing, but in the shop it really is kind of a woman thing. And you know, there's this sort of mother, daughter, sister, aunt relationship among all of us that fills a need for a lot of us. You know, some of us have lost our moms. Some of us don't have great relationships with our moms. Some of us don't have children, but you know, really love the kind of interaction with younger people. Does that
Mhm.
make sense?
Oh, it totally does. For you, you know, in your business, community is essentially people coming to your store for a purpose or a class, or how does that work? What do these community things look like? You know, you mentioned the table in the store. What else is there?
Yeah, well, I do have in-person classes a lot, and we have things called knit-alongs where we have a kind of a simple project and everybody's making the same thing. So that's a further way of kind of building that community relationship. You know, you're linked by the fact that you're working on the same project and maybe you're struggling with the same thing, or you know, oh, what color did you choose? You know, how does that look? Which yarn are you using? So we have that. Plus, I think the thing that's important is I do this newsletter, you know, and the newsletter, like I said, it goes out every week. It's not just here's a bunch of stuff you can buy. It's very, very personal. Like I said, it started early in the business. And I write about what's happening in my life. I write about knitting, and I write about struggles and self-care and perfectionism and relationships and all those kinds of things. So people people feel like they know me through that newsletter because I do share very candidly, you know, about what's going on in my life and my kids and my dogs. And so when people come in, a lot of times they'll say, "Oh, I'm so glad to meet you. I love your newsletter. I read your newsletter." People feel like they know me, and that's a relationship that I have with each of them. And then if I have that with them, they can then have that with each other.
Your community is fairly deep, and what I mean by that is, you know, a lot of communities, especially in online stores, they're bringing people together around the topic, around the product. So, you know, I'm just going to pick up my phone because of the first thing in front of me. Like, so I might go on an Android phone user forum and we all just talk about phones, but we don't it's not personal. It's about the phone, where your community is more personal. And it sounds like you're bringing the common activity of knitting to bring human beings together versus talking about the product and the knitting. It's actually allowing people to learn about one another and make true social connections, sort of like an OG social network where, back in days of old, we did go to these third spaces. For me, when I was a kid, I was in the volunteer fire department. So in my high school years, the volunteer firehouse was my third space. Anytime that I had no place to go and didn't want to hang out at home, I'd go down to the firehouse, and would be always be a couple of people there. We'd hang out, watch TV, play pool, whatever, and just hang out. And it sounds like for your community, your store is a place where they can come in and just hang out, meet other people, smile, laugh. And while we're doing that, the bond that brings us together and causes us to form these relationships is our common interest in knitting. Is that
That
accurate?
is true. That is absolutely accurate. And I think you've hit it right on the head. I will say that we're not a community center. I mean, we're a business. So I am pretty clear that these are crazy for you projects they're coming in with and bringing,
Yep.
So, I mean, I like to make it clear that it's for my customers. I don't really have an issue with that. You know what I'm saying?
My assumption is that would never be a problem. I just, it sounds to me like that would totally be understood and implied and not have to be explicitly said. Have you had to explicitly say that before?
Well, I think in the past, I think when I first started, and honestly, when I first started the shop, I was a brand new yarn store. So certainly there were going to be knitters around who had yarn from heaven knows where. People knitters have stash, right? That's that's what we do. We go on vacation. We don't buy a souvenir knickknack. We buy a skein of yarn. So everybody had souvenir yarn. They had projects half finished. So they came in, and I welcomed them, and I was really happy for them to have found the shop and to see that, yeah, we are here and we do know what we're talking about. And yeah, you have that project half finished from 5 years ago, and yeah, we'll help you get sorted out with that. But the expectation, of course, is that going forward, you're going to be getting your projects from us. And I think people do really get that. It is a friendly, welcoming place, but I think it's pretty clear that you're not going to bring yarn from the craft store in and expect to be, you wouldn't take your hamburger from McDonald's and sit down at a restaurant someplace else and eat it there.
I'm laughing as you're saying this because in my mind, I can see a Seinfeld episode where George Costanza shows up at the book club, but brings his book instead of the book club book, right?
Exactly.
And, today we're reading this book over here, and Costanza's going, no, we got to talk about this one. I was like, it's just so absurd. It would make a Seinfeld episode, I would think.
That's a brilliant Seinfeld episode. I love Seinfeld.
What do you think are the benefits of having this community as part of your store?
Honestly, from a sales perspective, just getting people into the store to see what we've got is crucial. I mean, it's traffic.
Yep.
The having the people come into the store for whatever reason. I'm not a big into sales. I'm not a hard sell person. I'm like, here's this. I think it's lovely. If you would like to make it, here's what you will need. But people aren't sitting at home thinking, gosh, I have no yarn at all. Because they do, and they probably have 5 projects on needles already. But when they come in and they see this beautiful new thing, it's like anything. You go to the store, you don't need any new clothes. You have plenty of clothes. You go to the store and you see something, wow, that's really pretty. Maybe I should get that, or whatever. You go to the grocery store. Your sales are a lot lower when you go to the grocery store with a list and you don't look at anything else. But when you go in and you're just kind of hanging around, oh, look at that, chips are on sale. You're going to buy the chips. So it's like that. So the community coming in, having people come into the store gives me a chance to tempt them with what's new. And like I said, I'm not a hard sell. If you want it, great, we have it. If you don't, I get that. You probably have a million other projects and, whatever. But coming in and staying connected, I think when they come in, it's sort of a cyclical thing. You come in, you see your friends, you realize, oh my gosh, I love knitting. I love Crazy for You. I love being there. I do love this project, or I'm tired of this project, or whatever. It just, I don't know. It's a real feel good kind of thing, And
Yep.
sometimes you just want company, but you don't necessarily want to talk to anybody.
Mhm.
And you just don't want to be alone.
Yep. That totally makes sense. So do you have a whole set of regulars and like they show up every single week or however often you have classes? Or is it more lighter in attention or focus from an individual person?
Well, it's like anything, the 80/20. We definitely have our regulars, and I have three people on staff plus me, and we all work at different times. And Mary is in on Wednesdays and Thursdays, and Mary has, I call them her, her Mary groupies, and Jenny has her group. And we all kind of have those people that gravitate to one or more of us for a particular reason. Mary is an accessory knitter and she does scarves and shawls and stuff like that. And, her stuff is very light and very fun. And, the people come in and if it's 11 o'clock on a Thursday, Evelyn's going to be there. Right. And Judy. So I can sort of tick off the people that are going to be there when Mary's there. Jenny May works just one night a week and the occasional Saturdays. I can tell you who's going to be at the table when Jenny's, in. And I have my people. They want to be with me. Or, Ginny Stein, she is the technical genius. And when I have a problem with my knitting, it's Ginny I go to, right? She's like, and it's funny because her daughter is my age. So she always says, I'm the mom. I have to keep Ellen in line. And I just love her. She's kind of like a mom to me. But I think people who sort of wander through, they're not sure what it's like. So I try to make it very clear. People will ask, do you have like an open knitting time or a regular knitting time, which is something most yarn stores do. I don't want you to think for a minute that I'm unique in this. Most yarn stores have this kind of community around them. But I always tell people, you're welcome anytime. And I close the newsletter with, you are always welcome here. So people know that they're welcome. And if they need a little quick help or whatever, come in and hang out. There's always a spot at the table for you.
So you mentioned the table. I assume it's like in the center of your store, and you just kind of alluded to the fact that you really don't have a schedule. Is there a schedule for people, or is it more of the open invite?
It's really the open invite. It used to be that, like I said, we had that Friday morning thing, and that was sort of when everybody came, because a lot of people here work on the base and they have a compressed work schedule and they get every other Friday off. So they would come on Friday. But things shifted a lot with the pandemic. We had to stop the around the table. I mean, that was like the ultimate thing you didn't want to do, is get a bunch of people together in a small space. Not that it's a small space. I mean, we have 2,400 square feet. Yeah, I couldn't have those in-person classes. And that's why it was so important that I create a virtual community, which I did, because people still want to be together. They still need that casual, relaxed opportunity to interact.
Yep. So how did you, because it sounds like because of COVID, you created the virtual community. What does that look like? And what is different in the virtual community versus the old school retail store community?
We do have a lot of knit-alongs, which are virtual, and we're still doing that because what we found is that a lot of people have found us because of the podcast that I do now. Every Wednesday night I go live, and I have people that are discovering the shop from far away, and they're like, how can I be involved? So I mentioned Ginny Stein and her daughter that's my age. She's also a knitter, and she's actually running a knit along. She lives in Massachusetts. So it's a Zoom knit along for everybody who's making this one sweater. And she's running that. And so we have people from Michigan and California and some local people and people all over that connect over Zoom in very much the same way that you would if you were at the table,
It's amazing to me how the pandemic changed our ability to communicate with one another in video. And like in 2018, the idea of a community Zoom for knitters would have been impossible. But in 2022, it's like an absolute no-brainer because everybody in the world now knows how to use any video system, and especially Zoom. And it's one of those paradigm shifts that I think our whole entire society is going to be so different, not because of the fact we went through this pandemic, but because we learned a new skill and got over the inhibitions. Like when I first started doing these, these video conferences. Right now, you and I are on Google Meet and we're looking at each other and talking, even though the audience is only listening to us. When I started doing these Google Meets years ago, like 2018, it amazed me how many people that I'd be talking to and collaborating with online would not turn on their camera. And I don't think that's happened in years now, where everybody just turns on the camera. Nobody's afraid of being on video and that kind of stuff anymore, because we've gotten comfortable with these new tools. And I could see how you could use that, in your community, and just use that tool like you're saying. That actually sounds really cool.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll tell you, I've been through a variety of tools. There's one thing to have the camera like showing my face. Like when I do the podcast, people want to see the camera, but knitting is, knitting is about technique, and sometimes it's about close-ups. So I've been through a variety of technologies, getting a decent microphone, getting a camera that's going to not just the one that, you can see my face on, but one that I can show my hands and close up what I'm doing, that actually is going to have the technology that's not going to be jittery. And, it took a long time to figure that out, but we're there. Right. And so it really is a boon to not just my kind of business or community, but a lot of them. A lot of people are teaching piano or, all kinds of things via Zoom now, and digital courses, and that whole thing is phenomenal.
Yeah. And I think you brought out an important point, which is we've all just got to figure that out and learn, right? So you have to have the right equipment, which is going to take you a while to figure out, like, what is the right microphones? What is the right camera setup? You need two cameras. You need a face camera and a hand camera, you need a top-down one, and all that kind of stuff. And then what software are you going to use? But as store owners today, to me, that type of content creation is so important to your business that you need to figure that out and learn those skills and develop that knowledge, so it's in your tool belt of things you can do.
Absolutely. You taught, I mean, it's been amazing to have met you and to have worked with you, even just so far. It's been phenomenal. You talk about content creation, and I love your podcast. I listen to it. And that's really sort of changed the way that I am writing my newsletter, but also customer acquisition. You talk about that. And it's striking how many people find the store from a variety of sources, from the YouTube podcast. And now lately, I've noticed from the content that I very carefully put together, not because I'm, trying to sell anything, but it's good content. And the newsletter has become a more useful vehicle for my customers. When I'm writing content that I want to have on the website, like, what are the different weights of yarn? I just did a blog post on that and I put it out there. I noticed that somebody signed up for my newsletter because they had found me through that blog post. I'm not sure if I had a point in there.
No, it's a really good point. So we were talking about metrics, right? And how you're doing these, and how do you measure what's working, what's not. It sounds like, because I was assuming that your community would be a retention tool. You acquire customers through all your channels and use your community to re-engage them. But you're also saying that it's an acquisition tool for you, because you're doing these things on YouTube and on a blog. That content gets pushed out, and that draws new people in who may not have found you otherwise. So your community is both customer acquisition and customer retention.
Yeah, trying to think. I mean, I think you are right that it is probably more customer retention.
Mm-hmm.
I'm trying to think about how community would be customer acquisition. I mean, obviously the classes,
Yep.
certainly in-person classes, people come because it can be, as welcoming as we try to be in the space, it can be intimidating to walk into a space where there's a table full of people who are chatting, who clearly know each other, and just sit down and introduce yourself. I'm sure that's pretty intimidating. I'm not sure I would want to do it. But
I'd add to that intimidation, right, is because you mentioned they all know each other and that kind of stuff. But what I've always found for me personally, the intimidation is also skill set, right? Like when I want to go
yeah.
new and you join a group, you're like, all these people know how to do it already. Like, and that's been a big intimidator for me. So I can see, your knitters, like your newbie, your newbie knitters, you're like, these people are so good. But what I've always found,
Totally.
once you join the community, the experts love the newbies because they love sharing their knowledge, right? And the newbies love the experts because they learn more quickly. And it's one of those virtuous cycles that is just beautiful to see happen over and over again.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. So in addition to like the regular, like weekly kind of stuff, we do classes. And I think those in-person classes are sometimes how people kind of break in or feel like they're comfortable breaking in because it's a class, right? Everybody's and when I have a class, I always go around the room, introduce yourself, how long you've been knitting, what do you hope to get out of the class, blah, blah, blah. Just a sort of, I don't know, not an icebreaker because it sounds so, but you know what I mean. I do a retreat twice a year and I bring people from all over into the shop, and we have 3 days together to do knitting stuff. And we go out to dinner and we drink and we eat and we snack and we learn stuff. And then the last day is Sunday and I do a show and share brunch where people will knit all year to do something that they're going to show at the show and share brunch. So, you have people showing these fabulous things. I had to limit it, you can only show 3 things. Okay. Because people are bringing out all this stuff. And I mean, it's wonderful, but I have usually 30 people there and I want everybody to have a chance to share their stuff. So anyway, people are sharing these amazing things. And I had this woman who was kind of brand new and she knit exactly one thing and it was a hat. Another woman had something just on her needles, like she hadn't even finished a whole thing. And everybody at her table was like, oh, come on, Susan, you got to go. You've got to share. And she's like, I don't have anything to share. But, she was a sport and she stood up and she said, I'm Susan. And, I've been knitting for about 2 weeks. I'm working on this. Everybody was like, yay. You know what I mean? And it
Yep.
really was, I don't know, it just makes my heart so happy when I see that because it really is. And I do think this is probably unique to my store. I have the nicest customers. I have had teachers from all over the world teach here. Really famous, you wouldn't know their names. We call them the Knitterati.
Yep. Yep.
201, they tell me, wow, you really have the nicest customers. They really are lovely. And
Yep.
these are people who've taught everywhere.
I think that's probably a function of you and your store staff and the environment that you foster, by being supportive, introducing everybody, and probably things you don't even think about. And maybe some of them you do, but it's not just your
Yeah.
presence that make it that nice of an environment.
Well, I do credit my team. They're amazing. They
Yep.
are, wonderful, wonderful. And I'm pretty careful when I select team members. I can teach anybody to knit, right? I can't teach anybody to be a particular type of person, kind and patient. And I don't know, there's just a whole bunch of stuff that goes into it. And I kind of like, I'll identify people. If she ever wants a job, I would hire her. If she's ever available, I would bring her on. Ginny and Mary, I knew when I first met them that I wanted them on the team. And I asked them and asked them, asked them, and they said, no, no, no. And then finally I'm like, come on, you could do this. It's just a couple of days a week. They've been with me 10, 12 years.
So that's I think it's one of the important things about community is the people that are managing the community. There's all these best practices out on the internet, and there's nothing. I always say there's nothing wrong with any best practice you hear. Most likely, they're all true. The only question is, are they true for you? Everybody's listening like, oh, community, this sounds great. I'm going to do that. But you have to be honest with yourself. Are you the kind of person who can manage a community? Like me personally, no, I'm not. Right. I don't want to see people and new people every day and introduce myself. That's why I work alone in my garage. Right. Which is perfect for me, but for other people, it's not. So I think people have to be honest with themselves about what their strengths are and what their skills are, and then use that self-evaluation to determine how they're going to apply that to their business. So, people are listening like, yeah, I love the idea of community. Well, if you're an outgoing, friendly, kind, you smile at people when they first walk in naturally, because I literally do not, right? But if you're that kind of person, then you should think about adding community to your store. If you're the kind of person that doesn't want to get distracted, doesn't like, talking to new people, then maybe community is not for your business, even though community could benefit it, but it's not the right thing for you. So you shouldn't add it to your store.
Yeah, I would say you're absolutely right. You have to like people. I mean, all people. I would tell my kids, I tell everybody else, the people who are the hardest to love are the ones who need it the most.
Yeah. Yes.
And you kind of you have to know that. You're right. You have to know that about yourself. And if that sounds like the worst thing in the world for you to be spending your time doing, then don't. I mean, you
Yeah.
can build your business by being this super efficient, fastest shipping, whatever. I'm not that. I'm not the fastest shipper. And, if somebody sends me an order and there's a crisis, I might just reach out and say, "Hey, it's Ellen. Thank you so much for your order. I just have to tell you, this and this happened, and I'm not going to be able to ship this out for 2 days. Is that okay?" Or, when somebody places an order and this is the bane of my existence, my inventory is wrong and we don't actually have the thing that they ordered,
Mhm.
which happens. I mean, you can imagine I've got, thousands of different yarns and each one has dozens of different colors and whatever. Yeah, having to call somebody up and say, "Hey, we don't have that color, but you know what? This color would work. It's really, really close. Can I send you a picture?" So it is a very personal touch kind of thing.
Yep.
And if that's not something you like to do, then this maybe isn't your kind of business.
Yeah. So I want to go back because you mentioned something that I had not heard you talk about before, because we have interacted in the past. And that is, I forget what you called it, but you fly people in for 3 days, or they fly themselves in for 3 days and do your little knitting
My
powwow.
retreat. Yeah,
Your retreat.
retreat.
How did you get started on the retreat? I mean, how long have you been doing that? And because that sounds like a commitment on their part and on your part to set that all up and organize it.
Well, it's kind of funny. So I started in 2012, and it was actually a group of customers that were my Wednesday night regulars in the Plata. I used to have another location. And this group got together on Wednesday nights and they really, really liked to be together. And we used to go to other places. So I would plan a big event. I would find a cute little town that had a hotel within walking distance and, cute little Main Street downtowny kind of place. And I would rent the hotel rooms and I would plan the meals and all the stuff. And then I would sell it as a package. And we did that every year. It was usually spring or summer every year since 2012. And we did not do it, obviously, in 2020. And in 2021, that summer was a year after. And, the vaccinations had been in and everybody was vaccinated and, we all felt pretty safe. But nobody really felt safe traveling. So the town that I live in had just had the local hotel completely refurbished. And so it was just like a perfect setting. I mean, when I look for a little town, it was exactly like the little town that I live in, hotel right there. And it was great because I was in control now. It was at my store, it was at my space, and I could sort of bring the people in and manage that. And I knew what the expenses were going to be. And I had a relationship with the owners of the different restaurants, so I could do that. I knew the caterers. I knew the lay of the land. It got to be so good that now I'm doing it twice a year. And I tell people ahead of time, "Hey, here's the date for the retreat. I block a set of rooms." I don't know. You can probably tell. I love to entertain. I mean, I entertain at home. I love to have parties. I love to do events. I love to bring people together and make them happy. I love to cook. So, I'll bake this or that. Even when I have classes, I usually, if it's a full day class, I'll usually bring in a light lunch that I've made, some salad or, bread or whatever. It's kind of warm and homey, but that's who I am. That's
Yep.
just who I am.
Well, and that's what your community likes, right? That's why
Yeah.
they keep coming back. Have you retreats? Do you always sell out your retreat? And if you do,
Oh, yeah.
like how far in advance do you sell them out?
One of the retreats, it was funny. I sold it out in 3 days. I mean, they're not cheap. They run a couple hundred, $300. And that does not include the hotel.
Okay, I was going to say for 3 days of food in bedding, that's not a bad price, but I get
No, that does not include the hotel. It includes dinner Friday night, full day workshop on Saturday, lunch on Saturday, and brunch on Sunday because everybody's on their own for dinner Saturday night.
yep.
And I do nice. I give everybody a nice tote bag that's got the logo and everything on there, and it's got swag and fun
Yep.
stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can
But I
totally.
try to make it really, really nice. I want people to leave feeling pampered and spoiled, like, oh, this was so great. I love this. And there's lots of snacks and
Yep.
so it's important to me. And we do a little wine and cheese thing on Friday night, and I usually have a fancy trunk show. And I partner with my vendors. I have some really great vendors who give me swag and stuff. And you know,
It's just amazing. Like I said earlier, like that is such a piece of work to organize and put together. And you're just randomly spewing off like every question I would ask, like, do you get vendors involved and all that kind of stuff? Like you're doing it all. And I imagine that over time, like every year you get better at it kind of thing.
I would hope so. Yeah, we do. We really have. I think we have honed it to the point where we know exactly what works, how many people we can accommodate, what, every after every retreat, we sit down and we're like, okay, what are our lessons learned this time? What could we have done better? What should we have done differently? What worked? What didn't? But people know what to expect and they like that.
Is it the same people coming to the retreats every year?
A
Is it?
lot of them are the same. I would say probably 80% are the same people.
Wow. What's the
You
farthest
know,
one travels to get there?
well, we had someone from Maine
Hmm.
last time. She would have come again, but that didn't work out. I had a gal come from Idaho.
Yep.
She came because she has a friend who lives nearby, and that's kind of how she got hooked up with the shop generally. I have a gal in California. I think she's planning on coming next time. I have a gal from New Orleans that comes.
Yep.
She's already booked her flight for the February retreat.
Well, and we didn't mention it, but you're in Maryland, so people know. So
Right. I'm in Maryland. I'm in Southern Maryland, which is not on your way to any place at all. It's a peninsula. It's the southernmost peninsula in Maryland. I like to say we're on Maryland's western shore. So you think about how the Chesapeake Bay runs up between the eastern shore. We're on
yep.
the other side of that water.
Yep. So nobody's driving by your store by accident. It's
No, nobody's on their way to the beach or whatever. I mean, we do have a lot of cool stuff here. Like this is where St. Mary's College of Maryland is. And we're also home to the Navy Test Pilot School. It's a really pretty place with 400 miles of waterfront. So while 80% of our economy is generated by the base or related to the base,
Mhm.
our second industry is tourism.
Yep.
So agro-tourism and wedding destinations and all of those kinds of things. And a lot of that centers around Leonardtown because it is such a cute little town, and growing.
Yep. You were talking about doing retrospectives, which is awesome. If you think about your overall community efforts, like what are the highlights of things that have worked well, and then what are the things that don't work well? Like what have you learned to keep doing, and what have you learned we're never going to do that again?
Well, we do talk about this a lot in the shop and with the team. The retreats are hugely successful for us, not just from a community standpoint, but from a sales standpoint. Our sales for that weekend are probably a third of our monthly sales goal.
So people come to your retreat and then carry home an entire luggage full of your yarn. Is that what you mean by that?
That's what I mean by that.
Okay.
So that's really good. And a lot of these people don't get a chance to visit the shop on a regular basis. So, they do live far away. They're stocking up. And it's not like yarn goes bad, they can keep it as long as they want. So the retreats work really, really well. I just started last season doing something that I love to do. And it's so fun. And you're going to hate it. You're going to think it's horrible, but it is amazing and people love it. I just did an Instagram reel on this. It is afternoon tea with Rowan. Rowan is one of my biggest accounts. It's a British company and they sell beautiful, beautiful yarn. And I recently became a Rowan flagship store. So for their launch, we have a spring launch and a fall launch. For their launch, I have afternoon tea with Rowan, and I lay it out. I mean, 18 people. I bring in bone china and sterling silver and teapots, and I make cucumber sandwiches. I make 3 different kinds of sandwiches and 4 different kinds of sweets and scones and clotted cream and jam and the whole bit. I mean, the whole works. And we serve that, and it costs $50. And what they get in addition to the tea is they get a copy of the Rowan magazine, which is this beautiful, thick, glossy pattern collection. And that costs $30 itself. And then I also give them little samples of all of the current yarns in the Rowan line for that season. So they have like little bits they can swatch and play with. And then they just have a great afternoon, drinking tea, looking at their projects, looking at the patterns, and they usually buy stuff there too. And if they don't buy it that day, they have the book, they have the pattern book. And what's unique about the pattern book is those patterns are not available online. A lot of knitting patterns are available through a resource called Ravelry, where you can download individual patterns or whatever. These are not available there. They're only available in this book. And when that book is out of print, they're not available at all. So it's a special event, and it feels special. We get a little dressed up, and what can I say? We drink tea.
Is Rowan involved with that as the vendor, or is it just crazy for you doing this?
Crazy for you doing this, but I have the most amazing rep, and he calls me every time, and he's like, okay, when is your tea? What can we do to support you? And I mean, they are very generous to me. This year, they gave me a skein of yarn to give to every customer, and they gave me a little lookbook. And, I try not to lean on them too much, but like I said, they're very kind and they're very generous with me. I'm a good customer. I pay my bills on time.
But, bringing them in and getting the free skein of yarn, like, they're adding value to that whole process. It doesn't cost
100%.
you. That I think is a best practice is, bring your vendors into your community because they're going to add value to that without you having to even think about it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, it is one of those virtuous cycles like you're talking about. The better they support me, the more of their yarn I sell, and the more of their yarn I sell, the more yarn of theirs I buy. And, it's a high-end company. Their yarn is not the cheapest out there, but their designs are gorgeous. Their yarn is first rate, and they put so much into the whole design process. This is a fashion business. People don't understand, and they think yarn store, they're thinking Michael's, they're thinking Hobby Lobby. A local yarn store, an independent yarn store, is part of the fashion chain. The colors and the yarns that you see on our shelf are going to be the colors that you're going to find in ready to wear. The yarns that they're not, bright green and Christmas red. They're fashion colors, they're style, they're dictated by Pantone.
Yep.
So it's a different experience.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. You've talked about a couple of things you've learned and how you're testing things out and, sticking with sticking what works well. What are a couple of things you've learned? Like, how do you manage a bad community member? Have you ever uninvited somebody, or, what's that process look like?
A while ago, I did have a woman who was rude to one of my staff members, and I'm not sure how that happened or why, but I told her that was just really unacceptable. If she had an issue with a product or something that I could make right, that's fine, but there's no call for her to be rude and disparaging to somebody on my team, because I told her this is my family. Family is important to me. I tell everybody, customers, team, family first. If you have a crisis with your family and you can't make a class or whatever, it's fine. Family's first. And so these women, as an extension of that, are, they're very important to me, and I'm not going to let somebody treat them badly. So I think I told her that she probably wasn't going to find what she was looking for at Crazy for You, and I was sorry.
Yeah. So, sounds like you used your mom skills.
Yeah, I do have 4 kids, so there's that.
So let's get ready to close up here. Let's
Sure.
shift a little bit. Let's talk a little bit about Shopify store owners out there today who don't have a community, who aren't doing yarn. What are the kind of things that you think that they should be thinking about for building a community of their own? What should they be doing?
Oh my gosh, there are tons of things that you could do. If you're a bicycle store, you could be hosting, bike races or bike rallies or, classes on how to maintain your bicycle. And you can sub out anything you're purchasing for bicycle, how
Yep.
to do anything. I mean, be the hub for people who are interested in your product. Be the resource where they're going to find other people who love to do what they do, because we like people like us. People like, it's like Seth Godin says, people like us do things like this, right? People who buy high-end bicycles, like, high-end bike experiences or whatever. Just figure out what it is that your customers are doing together and be the resource for them to do that. So build that connection with yourself, with you and your customers, and then create the relationship and community among your customers, being part of that, it,
Yeah,
it can be pretty tangential too. I mean, I take ladies to go get bra fittings because sweaters don't look great unless you've got the great foundation garment. So it could be anything, get people fitted for bike shoes. You might not sell bike shoes, but there's probably someone who does. And
yep.
be a resource and a community hub where people find what they need through you and they find each other through you.
And that makes a lot of sense where like people or people like them. Or, I've had a lot of groups that I've been part of in my life that I just call them activity partners, right? Would I ever hang out with this group of people if we weren't doing volleyball together? No. But we have a great time because we're doing volleyball together, right? People just enjoy sharing time around a common thing. And that common thing helps you get over some of the things you may not like about that person, right? Because we're all playing volleyball together, they'll tolerate all my idiosyncrasies and I'll tolerate their idiosyncrasies. We get along better because we have this common thing that we're doing together. And for
It's
you,
the social glue.
yeah, yeah, that makes a
Yeah,
lot.
absolutely. Yeah. I mean, and right. We do tolerate people. I mean, we're all weird in our own way.
Absolutely.
We all are. But yeah, that's absolutely true. That whatever it is that you do, whatever need that you fill with your Shopify business, there's a way to get your customers together around that. You just have to kind of think on it.
Yeah.
What are people doing? Where do they like to go? What else do they do? I mean, people should probably have a customer avatar. What else do your customers do? What's
Yep.
tied closely to your product or your business that you can expand on and leverage?
What I like is when I asked that question, I was expecting a bullet point list because I think in bullet points, right? And I was expecting a bullet point list from you of do this, do this, do this, and you didn't do that. What I love is you said, "Hey, think about your customer and your business, and you figure it out." Because it's going to be different for every business because every business and every customer segment is different. But if you care about community for your business, you can probably sit down for a few minutes, close your eyes, and think of some ideas about how to bring them together around this common, thing that they're doing with your products and build community around that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it's really kind of fun. I mean, I think it makes the whole business more pleasant generally.
Yes. For social people like yourself, who you probably started a retail store because you like that social interaction with people. Where I started a one-person web agency because I don't like that social interaction. But a lot of store owners are in that space of they want to meet new people and do new things. And adding community to that. What I found interesting in this conversation is your community also generates you money. Your community events is another revenue stream for you. Not only does it sell you more product, but the events themselves produce revenue too.
Yeah, that's one of the things that I think you had asked, what would I stop doing? I'm not going to do any events that don't provide some revenue for me, because it's not, no kidding, the lot of work. I mean,
Yep.
I'm not going to lie. These events are a huge amount of work. And a lot of times I have to close the store for it.
Yep.
So if they're not generating revenue, then they're probably not really worth my time, because at the end of the day, this is a business. And if I'm not making money, then I can't be here. I can't be the resource people want. I mention this to folks all the time. Oh, I've already bought so much stuff, or whatever. It's like, well, you love having this resource here. This is the engine. Your purchases and your support are the engine that allows me to continue to be and exist.
Yes. And one the other part about that is, by charging for your events, your people are more committed to the event because they've got skin in the game. They put money in. So they're going to be more likely attentive and participatory in that event, and more likely to buy product because they're already willing to put money down. So it's one of those self-fulfilling prophecies. It's a nice filter of, to join our community events, you have to pay, and that just has a lot of benefits down the road.
Yeah. Now, a lot of the events that I charge for, I'm not making money on those events. Okay.
Yep.
They are not revenue generators. I cover my cost. I'm not going to be losing money on them.
Yep.
But I don't expect them to be money makers. It's the event that brings the people in to make the sales.
Yep.
There might be in the future events that are more revenue generating, but mostly it's just to cover the cost.
Yeah, and for you, right, because you have a consumable product, right? Once I use my yarn and make my sweater, I got to go buy more yarn. Where on the bicycle events, like going back to your analogy before of a bike shop, they might actually make their events a profit center, because they're not going to make as much money off the person coming to the event who already spent $6,000 for the bicycle. They might buy a couple tire tubes or a light or whatever, but so they might have to think and make that a revenue or a profit generator for them, not just a revenue stream.
Exactly. That would be a very different kind of event. But classes are great. People who buy expensive bikes like that, they may or may not really know how to tune that bike in between. They may take the bike in, twice a year to get serviced in between seasons, but to really show them how to care for your bike. What should you be doing for your bike before every ride? What you should be doing for your bike after every ride. And partnering with somebody like that fuel guy that he was on your podcast. He has the fuel, the supplements.
Rhino Power.
Yeah, Rhino guy, the Rhino guy. And we could partner with him and say, look, this guy provides, nutritional supplements for people who do like powerful riding. Imagine what they do for you, and, have him in and have him be a speaker. Yep. And, start selling that stuff. Yeah, there's a million things.
Build an affiliate revenue model there. Yeah, you're absolutely right. Well, once you bring people together on a common goal, you can monetize them in a bunch of different ways.
Yeah.
Like I just watched a video the other day about a guy who's, probably the most popular Airbnb YouTuber on YouTube. And he makes like $750,000 a year from his YouTube channel, on top of the millions he makes doing his Airbnbs. And he showed, I make this much from ads, I make this much from sponsorships, I make this much from affiliates. And what he was showing is, when you bring a lot of people together and that audience is valuable, there's multiple ways to monetize them. And that's also what you saying, as you bring your community together, think about other ways to monetize them, because the valuable asset is the people.
Yes. The eyeballs, the attention.
Yes, exactly. And you're doing all the hosting, things to make it a captive audience that is highly engaged during that time.
Yeah. And when I charge for stuff, it allows me to make it a better experience.
Yes.
If I was having to take all of the expenses associated with the event from the profit, it would no longer be worth it to me to make the experience as high end as it is.
Yeah, and that's one of those self-fulfilling ones, right? By having the quality bar, you can charge for it, but you couldn't have the quality bar if you didn't charge for it. Right?
Exactly. Yes, exactly. Exactly. That's a really good point. So yeah, I mean, and people are looking for nice things. I mean, I have a really great demographic in that these are women with a passion for their hobby. And, let's face it, yarn is not a, necessity. It's definitely something you have to have disposable income for. But it's a little bit recession proof in that, people may not go on a big holiday or they may not go out to dinner as much. So they feel like they can treat themselves
Hmm.
to maybe a new project.
Hmm.
And, so when things are tight, people are knitting. And when things are flush, people are knitting.
Makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for your time today. I really appreciate you sharing all this advice and insight for the rest of the Shopify owners that are listening to our podcast.
Well, I hope it's helpful to someone, but thank you for having me.
Thanks a lot.
Yep. Talk soon.
You've been listening to the Shopify Solutions Podcast with Scott Austin. This podcast is brought to you by Jade Puma, a Shopify-focused agency located in San Diego, California. If you like what you heard, please leave a review and subscribe on iTunes or wherever you get your podcast.